that had ruled the stars for 300 years. Their empire stretched across 200 worlds, and 12 different species knelt before them. They were tall creatures with skin and 4 arms, and they believed they were the greatest beings in the universe. No one had ever defeated them. No one had ever come close. Elder Commander stood on the observation deck of his flagship and looked down at the planet below. It was a mining world, filled with slaves from a dozen conquered species. Among them were humans, small and weak creatures that they had crushed long ago. There, a blue planet called Earth was now nothing but glass and ash. Their fleets had been destroyed in a single day. Their species was broken. Found humans amusing. They worked hard and died easily. They made excellent slaves, and they told the strangest stories. His aide approached with a tablet. "Commander, we have received a strange report from the outer sectors." Took the tablet without much interest. Reports from the outer sectors were usually boring. Pirates, equipment failures, and lazy commanders making excuses. But as he read this report, his 4 eyes narrowed. A freighter captain claimed he had seen something impossible. A massive human warship had appeared from nowhere, destroyed a convoy of slave ships, and vanished into some kind of space fold that should not exist. The captain was hysterical. He kept repeating a name that made no sense. The Prometheus Unchained. Laughed, he had heard this name before. It was a myth, a fairy tale that human slaves told their children. According to the legend, when Earth was dying, the humans had built one final ship. They had put their best weapons on it, their people inside it, and sent it into hiding. The ship would wait, the story said. It would wait until the time was right, and then it would return to take revenge. It was nonsense, of course, that had destroyed everything. There was no hidden ship. There was no secret weapon. There was only the Dominion, eternal and undefeated. Ordered the freighter captain executed for spreading dangerous lies. He did not want the slaves getting ideas. Hope was a dangerous thing, and it needed to be crushed wherever it appeared. 3 days passed. Forgot about the report. He had more important things to worry about, like the upcoming tribute ceremony and the political games at the imperial court. The outer sectors were quiet again. Everything was normal. Then the monitoring stations went dark. It started with Station 12 on the very edge of the home system. One moment it was sending normal reports. The next moment, silence. Sent a scout ship to investigate. The scout ship found the station intact. Its crew was alive, but something was very wrong. Every single crew member was sitting in their chair, staring at nothing, repeating the same words over and over again. They spoke in perfect, which should have been impossible since none of them were. They were all members of conquered species who barely knew 10 words of the imperial language. "The fire that was stolen has been returned," they said. "The fire that was stolen has been returned." The scout ship commander tried to shake them awake. He tried to make them stop. Nothing worked. They just kept repeating those words like machines. And then the commander noticed something else. Something that made his blood run cold. On the outside of the station hull, someone had burned words into the metal. The letters were 30 meters tall, carved deep by some kind of weapon they had never seen. The word was in an ancient human language, but the translation was attached in the station's corrupted logs. Prometheus received this report in his private chambers. He read it 3 times. His hands were shaking, though he would never admit it. This was impossible. This was a trick. Someone was playing games with him. He ordered 5 more stations checked. All 5 reported the same thing: catatonic crews, burned messages, and something else that the first report had missed. Every single weapon on every single station had been disabled without a trace. No battle damage, no forced entry. The weapons simply did not work anymore, as if someone had reached inside them and turned them off. Word began to spread through the fleet. Soldiers whispered in corridors. Officers exchanged nervous glances. The name Prometheus appeared on data networks across the system, spreading faster than could contain it. And worst of all, the human slaves had started to smile. They knew something. They had always known something. Called an emergency meeting of his senior commanders. They gathered in the war room, a massive chamber filled with holographic displays showing the entire Dominion. 12 admirals, the most powerful military minds in the empire, sat around the table and waited for their elder commander to speak. "It is a hoax," declared. "Some group of rebels has found a way to disable our stations and spread propaganda. We will find them and destroy them. There is no mythical human battleship. There never was." Admiral Aura, the oldest and most respected commander in the fleet, spoke up. "With respect, Elder Commander, how do you explain the weapons? We examined them carefully. They were not damaged. They were at a level we do not understand. Someone accessed systems that should be impossible to access." "Human survivors," said, "hidden somewhere, using technology they salvaged from their dead world. We underestimated their cleverness. We will not make that mistake again." And the message, the fire that was stolen. Slammed his fist on the table. "Mythology, superstition. Humans are dramatic creatures. They like to tell stories. This changes nothing. We are the Dominion. We have ruled for 300 years. No one can challenge us." The admirals nodded but could see the doubt in their eyes. They were afraid. For the first time in centuries, the masters of the galaxy were afraid. That knight stood alone on his observation deck and stared into the darkness between stars. Somewhere out there, something was watching him. Something was waiting. He could feel it in his bones, a cold certainty that everything was about to change. He thought about the human slaves he had seen over the years, their quiet patience, their endless endurance, the way they looked at their masters with eyes that held secrets. He had always thought they were broken. He had always thought they were defeated. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he had been wrong. The stars seemed darker than before, and somewhere in that darkness, something ancient and angry was moving closer. The legend was waking up. Deep in the dead zone of space, where no living ship had traveled for 300 years, something massive moved through the darkness. The area was marked on every star map with warnings and skull symbols. It was the Sol system, the graveyard of humanity, a place of radiation and death. No one went there. No one wanted to go there. That was exactly why the Prometheus Unchained had hidden there for so long. Captain Miriam Cole stood on the bridge of the greatest warship ever built by human hands. She was 63 years old, though she had only been awake for about 10 of those years. The rest she had spent in cryogenic sleep, waiting in frozen dreams while the centuries passed. Now she was awake, and she had work to do. The bridge around her hummed with activity. 30 crew members sat at their stations, monitoring systems that were older than their grandparents but more advanced than anything they had ever imagined. The ship was enormous, nearly 3 kilometers long, built in secret during the last desperate months of Earth's existence. It was a carrier, a factory, a dreadnought, and a ghost all rolled into one. Commander David, her second in command, approached with a tablet. "The infiltration teams have completed Phase 1. All monitoring stations in the home system have been compromised. The message has been delivered." Cole nodded. "Casualties?" "None. Our stealth systems worked perfectly. They never saw us coming." This was the ship's greatest weapon, Cole knew. Not its massive rail guns or its nuclear missiles, but its ability to disappear. The hull was covered in materials that bent sensor waves around it like water flowing around a stone. The engines produced almost no heat signature. The Prometheus could sit right next to an enemy ship, and that ship would never know it was there. Cole walked to the main display and looked at the holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots marked territory, covering nearly a quarter of the known stars. Blue dots marked the scattered human populations that had survived the war, hiding in refugee ships and forgotten colonies. There were so few blue dots, so many red ones. "How long?" she asked. Understood the question. At current projections, if we do nothing, humans will be extinct within 500 years. Our populations are too small and too scattered. We are dying slowly. And if we fight? If we fight smart, if we use everything this ship can do, we have a chance. A real chance. Cole had been told this when she was young, before she volunteered for the Prometheus project. The plan was simple but required patience that most species could not imagine. Humanity would hide. Humanity would wait. Humanity would let them forget that they were ever a threat. And then, when the Empire had grown fat and lazy, humanity would strike. 300 years they had waited. Skeleton crews had kept the ship running, cycling through cryogenic sleep in shifts. They had watched the Dominion expand. They had mapped every weakness, every supply line, every political division. They had trained in secret, preparing for a war that their great-great-grandparents had started. Now the waiting was over. "Wake the next shift," Cole ordered. "All departments. I want this ship at full operational status within 48 hours." The waking process took time. 10,000 humans slept in the cryogenic bays, the largest collection of humanity left in the universe. They were soldiers, engineers, doctors, and scientists. They were farmers and teachers and artists. They were everyone that Earth had managed to save before the end. Cole remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about the last days. The sky burning, the cities falling, the desperate rush to get as many people as possible onto the Prometheus before it was too late. Her grandmother had been 7 years old when she boarded the ship. She had watched Earth die through a viewport, crying for parents who had stayed behind to give her a chance to escape. That sacrifice would not be wasted. Cole had sworn it on her grandmother's grave. As the crew began to wake, Cole reviewed the intelligence that the ship's automated systems had gathered over the centuries. The Dominion was strong, but it was not invincible. Their subject species were unhappy. Their military was spread thin across too many systems. Their leaders had grown arrogant, believing that no one could ever challenge them. Most importantly, they had stopped innovating. They used the same weapons, the same ships, the same tactics that they had used 300 years ago. Why would they change? They had won every war. They had no enemies left to fight. They had forgotten what humans could do when they were desperate. Lieutenant Sarah Park, the ship's chief engineer, arrived on the bridge with a report. She was young, only recently woken from her first long sleep, but her eyes were sharp and her mind was brilliant. "Captain, all primary systems are operational. The Fold space drive is ready for extended use. We can go anywhere in the galaxy within hours." This was another secret weapon. Normal faster-than-light travel took days or weeks to cross major distances. The Prometheus used a different technology, something that human scientists had discovered just before the war. Fold space allowed the ship to bend the universe around itself, jumping from one point to another almost instantly. They had nothing like it. "What about the fabrication systems?" Cole asked. "Fully operational. We can produce weapons, vehicles, and supplies for any resistance movement we contact. We can also build more ships, though that will take time." Cole smiled. The Prometheus was not just a weapon, it was a seed. Everywhere it went, it could plant the tools of rebellion. It could arm the oppressed, train the willing, and spread hope like a fire across the galaxy. "Begin jump calculations," Cole ordered. "First target is the system. According to our intelligence, the population there has been restless for decades. They just need weapons and leadership." The crew moved with purpose. After 300 years of waiting, they finally had something to do. They finally had a chance to fight back. Cole stood at the viewport and looked at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, her enemies were just beginning to realize that something was wrong. They were scared, she knew. They should be. "Commander," she said quietly, "send a message to every human frequency we can reach, encrypted, coded the way we planned." What should the message say? Cole thought about her grandmother. She thought about Earth. She thought about every human who had ever lived and died under rule. "Tell them we are coming. The fire has returned. Be ready." The message went out, racing across the galaxy at the speed of light, and on 100 scattered worlds in hidden camps and slave quarters and refugee ships, humans received it. They read it with tears in their eyes. They shared it in whispers. And for the first time in 300 years, they began to hope. The Prometheus folded space around itself and vanished, leaving only darkness behind. The hunt had begun. The explosion lit up the night sky of Prime like a second sun. 3 billion units of weapons and ammunition, stored in the most secure military depot in the Dominion, vanished in nuclear fire. The blast was so powerful that it could be seen from the planet's surface, a bright flash that turned night into day for just a moment. Elder Commander received the news while eating his morning meal. He stared at the report, unable to believe what he was reading. The depot had been protected by 200 warships, thousands of soldiers, and the most advanced security systems in the Empire. Nothing should have been able to get close to it. Nothing had gotten close to it. The security recordings showed nothing unusual until the moment of the explosion. No enemy ships, no infiltrators, no warning at all. One moment the depot existed. The next moment it was fire and ash. How demanded, how is this possible? His advisors had no answers. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes, afraid to speak the name that everyone was thinking. The Prometheus, the ghost ship, the human legend that was starting to feel very real. 3 days later, the Grand Archive on IV was attacked. The archive was the most important building in the Dominion. It contained the genetic templates for the living vessels that were grown rather than built. Without these templates, the Dominion could not create new warships. It had taken thousands of years to develop this technology. It was irreplaceable. Someone erased it all in a single night. When technicians arrived in the morning, they found every computer in the building dark. Every backup had been corrupted. Every physical copy had been reduced to ash by fires that had started and stopped on their own, burning only what needed to be destroyed. In place of the genetic data, someone had left a single file. The file contained the complete genetic code of a human being. Attached was a short message in perfect script. "Remember us." Called another emergency meeting. This time the admirals were not just worried, they were terrified. "We are under attack by an enemy we cannot see," Admiral Ora said. "Our defenses mean nothing. Our weapons are useless. We need to find this ship and destroy it before it does more damage." "And how do you suggest we find something invisible?" another admiral asked. "We set a trap. We find something the humans want, and we wait for them to come." Nodded slowly. It was not a bad idea, but what would humans want badly enough to risk their precious ghost ship? The answer came from an unexpected source. A slave analyst, brought in to study human psychology, suggested something that made the admirals uncomfortable. "Humans are emotional creatures," the analyst explained, trembling under the gaze of his masters. "They care about each other in ways that other species do not understand. If you threaten enough human slaves, if you make it public, the ship might come to save them." Considered this. It was cruel even by standards, but they were fighting something they did not understand, and normal rules no longer applied. "Choose a planet," he ordered. "One with a large human population. Make an announcement. If the ghost ship does not surrender within 30 days, every human on that world will be executed." The order went out. The planet chosen was Prime, home to 3 million human slaves and billions of. Did not expect the ship to actually surrender, but he hoped it would be forced to reveal itself. Then his fleets could finally destroy it. He did not know that the Prometheus was already at Prime. Captain Cole watched the announcement from orbit, hidden behind the planet's largest moon. Her crew stood in silence as the commander threatened to murder 3 million innocent people. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Others had fists clenched in anger. "We have 30 days," Commander said quietly. "What do we do?" Cole had already decided. "We do what we came here to do. We set the free and we get our people out." The plan was complex but not complicated. For weeks, Prometheus teams had been secretly meeting with resistance leaders. They hated their masters but had no weapons and no hope of victory. The Prometheus changed both of those things. Small pods were launched from the ship, too small to be detected by sensors. They fell through the atmosphere like shooting stars and landed in hidden locations across the planet. Each pod contained weapons, communication devices, and medical supplies. More importantly, each pod contained something they had never seen before: hope. The uprising began at dawn on the 15th day. Across the planet, billions attacked their masters at the same moment. They swarmed military bases with numbers that could not be stopped. They blocked roads and destroyed communication towers. They fought with the desperation of a people who had been slaves for 200 years and were finally ready to die for freedom. The garrison was not prepared. They had expected the humans to be the threat, not the. Their forces were positioned to watch the skies, not the ground. By the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. Cole watched the chaos from orbit, coordinating with resistance leaders through encrypted channels. "Focus on the spaceport," she ordered. "We need to control it before reinforcements arrive." They swept through the spaceport like a tide of clicking, chirping fury. Soldiers fell by the thousands, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The few ships that tried to escape were shot down by weapons that had appeared from nowhere, human weapons in hands. By sunset, the planet belonged to the resistance. Cole ordered the Prometheus to reveal itself. The massive ship dropped its invisibility and hung in the sky like a metal moon, visible to everyone on the surface. It was a message to the galaxy: humanity was not dead. Humanity was not defeated. Humanity was back. Rescue shuttles began landing immediately, picking up human refugees and carrying them to safety. Prometheus medical teams treated the wounded. Engineers helped the secure captured equipment. Before leaving, Cole broadcast a message on every frequency. Her face appeared on screens across the planet and beyond, reaching space and every slave population in the sector. "My name is Captain Miriam Cole of the human warship Prometheus Unchained. For 300 years my people have waited. For 300 years we have prepared. Today is the first day of your liberation. The Dominion is not invincible. The Dominion can be beaten. Rise up, fight back. We are with you." The message spread like wildfire. On a dozen worlds, slaves who had never known hope began to whisper about freedom. On Prime, Elder Commander watched Cole's face and felt something he had never felt before. Fear, real fear. The ghost ship was not just a ship. It was a spark that was about to set the galaxy on fire. The Dominion gathered the largest fleet in its history. 12 battle groups, nearly 1,000 warships, all with a single mission: find and destroy the Prometheus Unchained. Elder Commander led them personally, his flagship at the center of the formation. He would not trust this hunt to anyone else. Intelligence reports suggested the ghost ship was hiding in the nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that stretched across 3 star systems. The nebula was dangerous, filled with radiation and electromagnetic storms that made sensors almost useless. It was the perfect place for something to hide. Did not care about the danger, he cared about revenge. "All ships enter the nebula," he ordered. "Formation spread, sweep pattern Gamma, find the humans." The fleet moved into the swirling colors of the nebula, ships disappearing into the purple and orange clouds like soldiers entering a haunted forest. Communication became difficult almost immediately. Ships could barely see each other, relying on pre-planned positions and timing to maintain formation. Captain Cole watched them come from a position they could not detect. The Prometheus hung motionless in the thickest part of the nebula, its hull blending perfectly with the surrounding gas. The ship had been designed for exactly this kind of environment. While sensors struggled against the interference, Prometheus sensors cut through it like sunlight through fog. "I count 947 warships," Commander reported, "including 12 dreadnoughts and 34 carriers." Cole studied the holographic display. The fleet was spreading out, trying to cover as much area as possible. It was a reasonable tactic against a normal enemy. Against the Prometheus, it was a fatal mistake. "They are separating themselves," she said quietly. "They think numbers will protect them." "What are your orders, Captain?" Cole smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We hunt." The first attack came without warning. A destroyer on the edge of the formation suddenly exploded, hit by a rail gun round that had come from nowhere. By the time the nearest ships turned to investigate, the Prometheus had already moved, sliding through the nebula like a shark through dark water. Another ship exploded, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. Screamed orders trying to rally his fleet. "All ships, close formation, protect each other." But the nebula made coordination impossible. Ships that tried to move closer bumped into each other or got lost in the gas clouds. Weapons fire lit up the darkness, but most of it hit nothing. They were shooting at ghosts, at sensor echoes, at their own fear. The Prometheus appeared for just a moment, long enough to fire a devastating volley at a carrier that was trying to launch fighters. Missiles and rail gun rounds tore through the carrier's hull, igniting its fuel stores. The explosion destroyed 2 nearby cruisers as well. Then the ghost ship vanished again. Hours passed. The fleet was being torn apart piece by piece. Ships fired at each other by mistake. Crews panicked and broke formation. Commanders lost contact with their squadrons. The pride of the Dominion was falling apart. Watched the disaster from his bridge, his 4 hands gripping the command console so hard that his claws left marks in the metal. This was not a battle. This was a slaughter. His ships were dying, and he could not even see the enemy. "There," one of his officers shouted, pointing at a sensor ghost. "I see it." Ordered every ship in range to fire. Thousands of weapons blazed into the nebula, lighting up the gas clouds with the light of small suns. For a moment, he thought they had finally hit something. Then the Prometheus emerged from behind his own flagship, so close that he could see the markings on its hull. It had used the chaos as cover, slipping through his fleet while everyone was distracted. "No," whispered. The ghost ship's main weapons fired directly into the flagship's engines. The impact threw across the bridge. Alarms screamed. Crew members scrambled for escape pods. Through the viewport, could see his beautiful ship breaking apart, flames spreading through compartments that should have been invincible. He reached an escape pod just as the flagship exploded. As the tiny vessel tumbled through space, he watched the battle continue through a small window. The Prometheus was everywhere and nowhere, appearing just long enough to destroy another ship before vanishing again. By the time the survivors managed to escape the nebula, 8 battle groups had been destroyed. The largest fleet in Dominion history had been cut in half by a single ship. But the Prometheus had not escaped undamaged. Captain Cole surveyed the damage reports with a grim expression. A lucky shot had hit the fold space drive during the final stages of the battle. They could still fly, but they could not jump. Normal engines would take weeks to carry them anywhere useful. "Can we repair it?" she asked Lieutenant Park. The engineer shook her head. "Not without a proper shipyard. Some of the components are damaged beyond what we can fix. We need facilities, materials, help." Cole looked at the star map. Without the fold space drive, they were vulnerable. If they found them before repairs were complete, even the Prometheus could be destroyed. "Set course for the outer rim," she ordered. "The refugee flotillas are people." For 2 centuries, scattered groups of human survivors had hidden in the darkest corners of the galaxy. They lived on old ships, on barren moons, on worlds too poor for the Dominion to bother conquering. They had survived through luck and secrecy, always running, always hiding. It was time to stop hiding. The journey took 3 weeks, 3 weeks of watching sensors, praying that no patrol would find them. 3 weeks of repair crews working around the clock, trying to fix what could be fixed. 3 weeks of wondering if they had pushed their luck too far. When they finally reached the flotilla, Cole was not prepared for what she saw. Hundreds of ships had gathered, old freighters and converted mining vessels and anything else that could fly. Human ships from a dozen hidden colonies, all drawn by the message Cole had broadcast after Prime. They had come to find the legend, to see if it was real. Now they were looking at her, waiting for her to tell them what to do. Cole broadcast to the assembled fleet. "My name is Captain Miriam Cole. You know who we are. You know what we have done. But we cannot win this war alone. We need your help. We need every ship, every pilot, every engineer. We need humanity to become a nation again." There was silence. Then one by one, ships began signaling their support. Captains pledged their crews. Engineers offered their skills. Soldiers who had never held a weapon volunteered to fight. By morning, humanity had a fleet. It was small and ragged and held together by hope more than steel. But it was a beginning. Cole looked at the ships surrounding the Prometheus and felt something she had not felt in years. Not hope exactly, something stronger. Purpose. "We have work to do," she told her crew. "Let us get started." 2 years had changed everything. The Dominion was burning. Across 40 star systems, slave populations had risen against their masters. They had spread their revolution to neighboring worlds, teaching other species how to fight, how to organize, how to win. Human advisors traveled with them, sharing weapons and tactics and something more valuable than both: belief. They fought back with desperate fury, but they were fighting on too many fronts. Every fleet they sent to crush one rebellion was needed somewhere else. Every victory cost them soldiers they could not replace. The empire that had seemed eternal 2 years ago was cracking like ice in spring. Now the final battle was beginning. Captain Miriam Cole stood on the bridge of the Prometheus unchained and watched 300 human ships form up around her. They were not all warships. Some were converted freighters with weapons welded to their hulls. Some were mining vessels that had been armored with scrap metal. They were ugly and mismatched and wonderful. Behind the human fleet came their allies, carriers filled with millions of warrior insects ready to fight for their freedom, vessels from 6 other species who had joined the rebellion, ships that had once served the Dominion, now flying under new flags. In total, the Liberation Fleet numbered nearly 500 vessels. It was the largest non-military force in 300 years, and today it was going to end the war. "Jump complete," Commander announced. "We have arrived at Prime." The Dominion hung before them like a dark jewel, surrounded by the remains of its once mighty fleet. 400 warships still defended the planet, all that remained of the Empire's military strength. It was not enough, and everyone knew it. Elder Commander watched the enemy fleet from his new flagship, a vessel smaller and weaker than the one he had lost in the nebula. He was older now, his skin marked with the scars of a war he had never expected to fight. The arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced by something tired and bitter. "They actually came," he said to no one in particular. "They actually think they can win." His communications officer looked up nervously. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human ship. They want to speak with you." Laughed, it was an ugly sound. "Put them through. Let me see the face of my enemy." Captain Cole's image appeared on the. She looked older too, her hair, her face lined with the weight of command. But her eyes were the same, hard and determined and absolutely without mercy. "Elder Commander," she said, "your empire is finished. Your fleets are destroyed. Your subject species are free. You have 2 choices: Surrender and face justice for your crimes, or die here knowing that everything you built was a lie. Stared at her for a long moment. He thought about the old days when his species had ruled without challenge. He thought about the human slaves he had barely noticed, working and dying in the background of his glorious civilization. He had never imagined that those small, weak creatures could bring everything crashing down. "We will never surrender to prey," he spat. Cole nodded slowly as if she had expected this answer. "Then you will die as you lived, understanding nothing." The transmission ended. Cole turned to her crew. "All ships begin the attack." The battle for Prime was the largest space engagement in recorded history. Thousands of weapons fired across the black void, filling the darkness with light. Ships exploded and burned, their crews dying in fire and vacuum. They fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, knowing that defeat meant extinction. But they were outmatched. The human fleet moved with coordination that seemed almost supernatural. 300 years of planning, of training, of waiting had created warriors who understood their enemy better than the enemy understood itself. Every tactic was predicted. Every ambush was reversed. Every desperate gamble failed. The Prometheus led the charge, its weapons tearing through enemy ships like they were made of paper. Cole directed the battle from her bridge, calm and precise, making decisions that would determine the fate of millions. Around her, the crew worked in perfect harmony, each person exactly where they needed to be. Admiral Aura, the oldest and most respected commander, made a final charge at the Prometheus with his personal squadron. 30 ships, the last of his followers, screaming toward the ghost ship in a suicide attack. They never got close. The Prometheus defense systems activated, filling space with a web of projectiles and energy beams that shredded the attacking squadron in seconds. Aura died watching his ships burn, still unable to believe that humans could do this. By the end of the 5th hour, the fleet no longer existed. Stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by dead crew members and burning consoles. His ship was crippled, drifting toward the planet's gravity well. Through a cracked viewport, he could see the Prometheus approaching, its hull but intact. The human ship did not fire again. Instead, it simply watched as the vessel began its final descent. He would burn up in the atmosphere of his own, killed by the planet his ancestors had ruled for thousands of years. In his final moments, understood something. The humans had not won because they were stronger or smarter or luckier. They had won because they remembered. They remembered every death, every injustice, every moment of suffering. They had carried that memory for 300 years, nurturing it, building around it until it became something unstoppable. They had tried to destroy humanity. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, humans with a cause. The ship hit the atmosphere and began to burn. Above the planet, Cole watched the last flagship become a streak of fire across the sky. Around her, the Liberation Fleet was celebrating, ships signaling each other with lights and messages of joy. On the planet below, human slaves were looking up at the sky and weeping with happiness. "It is over," Commander said quietly. Cole shook her head. "No, it is just beginning." She was right. The war was won, but the work of building something new had only started. There were worlds to rebuild, species to help, old wounds to heal. Humanity would need to become more than just survivors and warriors. They would need to become leaders. 1 year later, Captain Cole returned to Earth. The planet was still dead in many places, but teams were already working to change that. Atmosphere processors cleaned the air. Engineers cleared the rubble. Somewhere in the ruins of what had been Geneva, a child laughed for the first time in 300 years. Cole walked through the ruins until she found what she was looking for, a simple stone memorial that had been erected during the building of the Prometheus. It listed the names of everyone who had volunteered for the project, everyone who had sacrificed their lives so that future generations might be free. Someone had carved new words at the bottom of the memorial. Cole read them and smiled. They said we were finished. They said our fire was stolen. They were wrong. We are humanity. We endure. We adapt. We remember. And we always come back. She placed her hand on the stone and closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother who had watched Earth die. She thought about her crew who had given everything for this moment. She thought about the generations yet to come who would inherit a galaxy full of possibility. The legend was over. The story was just beginning. Above her, stars that had once seemed cold and hostile now shone with promise. Humanity had returned to the universe, and this time they would not be forgotten. They would never be forgotten again.